I'm really glad to be part of this project here today because I believe that oral history is really one of those unsung heroes of our narratives. And there's an oral history expert called Sarah O'Brien who speaks about the fact that oral history is a completely different narrative from what we see written on the page. That oral history is a record of how things felt rather than the fact of what happened. And she talks about the amount of deep listening that's necessary to encourage somebody to tell their story. And with that deep listening comes silence, the ability to let a pause happen, and also for respect for the stories that you're gathering. I also believe that stories are real agents of change. Now, if we look at the two recent referenda that took place in this country, the equal marriage referendum and the abortion referendum, we could see people's minds being changed from very fixed or prejudiced positions to an openness towards something else through the stories of ordinary people. And I feel we really need to continue to capture those stories that fly below the radar because our day-to-day lives are increasingly noisy. And the project that Conn and Kandaliss are involved with Simon Community, that's why it's so fascinating to me. It uses all the power of oral history to capture those personal stories and to give it a richness, an immediacy and an impact by marrying those stories with virtual reality. Now, I'm going to start with you, Conn, because I know you were the impetus behind this project with Galway Simon to capture these stories as oral history, but also to marry them with virtual reality on the basis that there's a lot of research to show that virtual reality can actually help people empathise with stories that they might not be familiar with. So can you tell us a little bit about how the project came about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say, I'm working here with a team of people across the disciplines in the university. And so this is very much a collaborative project, both within the university and between ourselves and Galway Simon. So the project really came about, I mean, from my perspective, I in my day job, write about film rather than make films. And one of the things I'm really interested in is about how film kind of produces a sense of space and place and gives us, and I'm really interested particularly about the home. So I've written a lot about the home and how film and like Hollywood cinema produces this idea of home, and it's so strong. We all kind of imbibe it all the time because we watch so much films. And I'm just really interested then in, well, who gets to tell that story? Who gets to communicate what the world is like, and who doesn't? And so that kind of led me to I've in the past do some community filmmaking projects with Cope Galway, again with people who had experienced homelessness, making short films about their experience of home and homelessness. But virtual reality then is a technology that kind of came along in the 90s and sort of briefly flourished in the 90s, but the technology wasn't really very good. And so it's only since 2014 and Facebook bought Oculus, which was a small headset startup, that sort of VR has kind of come back into the public consciousness, and it's been very much pushed by the technology companies, for one, such as Facebook or Meta, as they are now. And so as you say, there's a lot of research done about how VR can enable us to take the perspective of another person, essentially. Because when you put on a headset, and I have a couple of headsets, so if anyone wants to have a go outside afterwards, they can. But when you get put on a headset, you're in a room with people. You are like a character in that room, and so there has been research done that shows that it's particularly good at producing empathy towards people, because you can literally kind of walk in their shoes. And so lots of NGOs and charities have kind of run with this. For example, the Red Cross have their own VR production studio. They make VR films with the aim of, again, increasing empathy towards, for example, people in areas affected by war. And ultimately, of course, impacting on people's beliefs, behaviours, and donations and all those sorts of things. So there's lots. It's really interesting. It's also really new though, and it's so no one really knows what VR is yet. So even again, Facebook have recently made this big transition towards VR as the future, but even Facebook don't know, or Meta don't know what that is. So on one hand, that gives us an opportunity to kind of get in there and do something interesting and useful with it, Yeah.
So when you decided in the collaboration that you wanted to gather these personal histories, how did that come about? How did those workshops evolve?
Well, the other side, so then independently, we were thinking about these things here in the university, and Tommy from Galway Simon, who is lurking in the doorway there, he independently was also thinking these things, thinking about how VR could be a really interesting way to help people to empathise with the perspective of people who had experienced homelessness. And so actually he came to us and said, listen, would you be interested in collaborating? And so we all spent a lot of time on Zoom during COVID and during lockdowns thinking about this. And the key principle that guides everything that we do is the idea of collaboration and co-creation. So that it has to be, everything has to be, everybody has to be equal. Everything has to be, as much as possible, the control, the creative control has to be handed over to the people whose experience is being documented. So we tried to design the project. We were trying to think about how can we design a project that makes sure that is the case. Mm-hmm. So one of the first thing we thought about was oral history, so that that we begin with people just telling their story. So we thought, well, okay, we can go and we can interview people who've experienced homelessness and ask them to tell their story. But then thinking about that principle of co-creation being at the heart of everything, we thought, well, wouldn't it be better if the people who had experienced homelessness were themselves the ones leading the interviews? So what we did was we brought in volunteers from Galway Simon, people who had experienced homelessness, and we gave them training in oral history techniques and interviewing, etc. And then the first stage of the process of the project was they interviewed, there was one-on-one interviews essentially. And so I've listened to those interviews, and they're incredibly powerful. And they are, at times, people are telling some really traumatic stories. And I think the difference between somebody being in that room who has experienced, maybe not the same experience, but a comparable experience, sitting there and asking those questions, rather than me, for example, sitting there and saying, because I can imagine that someone who is experiencing homelessness and is caught up in the kind of, the institutions that come with that, spend a lot of their time being asked questions by people from institutions, such as universities. And so, again, the idea is as much as possible to just hand over control. Okay. And so that was really at the heart of it, and that's where the oral history element came from the first place.
So just one final question for the moment before I turn to Kandaliss. How then is trust built? Because trust and empathy are kind of two sides of the same coin. So how is trust built in those situations?
Well, I can only talk about it from my perspective, and I'm sure Kandaliss can talk about it much more interestingly from her perspective. But what we tried to do was just, again, at every point, consent and collaboration were the key principles. So, anytime anyone, for example, told their story, it was made clear that if you don't want your story to be used, that's fine. At any point, you can remove consent. After the oral history phase, we did a 2-day workshop in a room next door here. And this was where we took those stories and we turned them into what is ultimately going to be the film. And so we had, again, some really key principles. So, for example, anyone who was in that room had to participate in anything that happened in that room. So when we were doing exercises, everybody had to participate. So, for example, at one point, the president of the university came in, and he was a very good sport, and we were doing a storytelling exercise, as I recall, about a gender-fluid flamingo, and the president again got involved, and was so if you were in the room, everybody was the same. That's the point when you're in the room. And so over those 2 days, it was really powerful. I felt, from my perspective, just people shared stories. We all shared stories. People shared stories that were, again, at times I think very difficult for people to share. But I think everyone felt it was a safe and trusting environment. And we shot the film then over another 2 days. And for me, the best part of the project so far was at the end of the 2-day shoot, one of the participants sent a text to a little WhatsApp group that we had, just thanking us for the sense, for the empathy and for the respect that they had felt. And so I hope that we did manage to create that trust.
Okay, well now I'm going to turn to Kandaliss, and I want to offer a very, very special word of thanks to Kandaliss for coming along here today. Kandaliss is at that wonderful stage, new life, new beginning, everything having changed. She's somebody who's in the process of building a brand new narrative for herself, only on the basis that she has responded to a lot of challenges over the years. And when we spoke beforehand, Kandaliss said something very interesting to me, that change is only possible when the person has an internal need to change. Then they can accept the hand of help that's offered to them. And that's what Kandaliss told me she found in Simon. So can you tell me a little bit about the difference that having a good listener made to you at that time when you were ready to make a change in your life?
Yeah, so throughout the years I thought that, I really wasn't listened to, and it became me becoming very enclosed with myself and pushing a lot of people away, not wanting help. Even some people would offer, but because I didn't feel like I was listened to or even related to, I felt like there wasn't any hope for me, or I couldn't do anything right, because it was never a case of how are you, what can we do for you, help, the necessary supports around me. And when I came into Simon, it was all about, coming together to help and to listen and to help guide me in my own comfort, not push things on top of me or not make me go a certain way, but help guide me in the path that, I've chosen now.
Okay. You said to me also that you felt that you were failed much earlier on by the foster system. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I was in the fostering system at a young age, up until 18, and I did feel very much failed by the TUSLA fostering system and the care system, in regards to my needs not being met, in regards to things like mental health support, not being listened to, feeling like I was only a number to them, another person, that is going to come and go. I didn't have that tight connection where, I felt comfortable, and it had a big impact on my life, growing up. It had a big impact on the way that I seen the world, my perspective of the world, and the way I seen adult figures to me. So coming into Simon and seeing, people who are an organisation who have the same role as social care workers, listening to me and help guiding me in where I've come to now was immaculate. It was really special to me, and it really opened my heart and opened my eyes that, there's supports out there and organisations out there for people,
So can you tell us a little bit about where you are now in your life and what the future holds for you in the next couple of months?
Yeah, so currently I just got my first apartment, and I just finished painting it and decorating and designing it, and I move in next week, the beginning of next week, and I have a baby on the way in October, baby girl.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I have
Yes.
Since coming into Simon, I've actually participated. I'll be going on to doing my third course. I first did a barista and catering course. I then did a security course, and starting tomorrow, actually, I start doing a horticulture course, which is a 2-year duration. So I'm getting studying in, and I'm hoping within the next 5 years to create my own business. And
So there's no stopping you then? So how does it feel having the roof over your head and having all of those possibilities before you, compared, say, with where you were a year ago?
I was faced with homelessness a year ago, and I battled through a drug addiction that I'm now in recovery with. And being able to sit up here and explain the place that I'm in and how much I've achieved is something that I never thought that I could ever achieve or do, something that I never thought would have been actually possible for me, until I met the right people in Simon that helped me feel comfortable and feel safe and told me, you got this, you know, not make me feel like, oh, hold back, more so you do you at your own pace, you know, not pushing me, and, you know, accepting me for who I am, accepting me from my past, which is very difficult. I felt like throughout the years was very difficult for a lot of people, accepting that, you know, I had my challenges with mental health and drug addiction and abuse and everything. And, you know, with Simon, they really helped me, you know, feel like I was human, like I, you know, had a voice, like I was, you know, I wasn't just someone that was going to come and go from the organization, that, you know, they would help me and be there, be a support to me and help guide me. And it's really comforting and wholesome, and, you know, it would bring a tear to your eye almost, you know, because, you know, I feel safe being able to speak about my situation now because of the people that I had around me supporting me.
And you told me a lovely story about building a bond with someone very important to you.
Yeah. So building, you know, building a bond that you wouldn't have had before in regards to trust and hope and faith is something that really helped push me on and really helped me, you know, go in the direction I wanted to go and thrived to go in. Just knowing that these people aren't just a social care worker, and they're not just there just to do their job and move on, which I feel like I have definitely been treated like in the past in the care system. I felt like, you know, it wasn't a job to them. They genuinely wanted to help me. They genuinely wanted the best for me, and they were there for me, and it was very heartfelt. So building that bond and that trust, you know, created such a foundation for me as well to really open myself and flourish and go in the direction that I really wanted to go.
I think that deserves another round of applause. There are more questions I want to ask you, and I will come back to you a little bit later, but I want to turn to Clare now for a moment. And Clare is a prominent actor and writer, and as Katrina says, we have indeed seen her as the terrifying Amanda in the crime drama Kin, but also more recently as the writer and the star of that wonderful movie Herself. But she also played Prince Hal in the all-female version of Shakespeare's Henry IV, directed by Phyllida Lloyd, who also directed the movie Herself. And in an interview with Dave Fanning, and here's a secret that most of you won't know, Clare revealed that she's also played a most important part in the movie Spider-Man Far From Home. She was, she says, a baddie. And her job was to press some sinister button for Jake Gyllenhaal. She also promised she wouldn't be taking part in any more Disney remakes. And I think the quality of the film Herself that we have recently seen about a young mother fleeing from, I won't call it domestic violence because it's violence. Domestic violence to me seems to soften it somewhat. It's violence against the young woman, Sandra, in this movie. She's fleeing from that abusive situation. She's trying to make a home for her children. And as with Kandaliss' story, there were all sorts of obstacles for her to overcome. And she takes a very different route. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what happens and the inspiration for where that story came from, Clare.
Herself came about because I was in New York, just like doing auditions in pilot season and not getting very far. And a close friend of mine who's a young single mother with like 3 kids, she called me from Dublin, and we were just kind of catching up, but it wasn't like a normal catch up. It was quite urgent because she was like, I have to go and declare myself homeless. Because she was being evicted within a month and she couldn't find somewhere to move to. It was when it was really starting to kick off back in 2014, where there'd be queues around the block if the landlord took rent allowance or anything, you know. So she just didn't have a chance. And so she had to declare herself homeless and go into temporary accommodation. And I was so angry on her behalf because in her nature and in her character was somebody that was quite determined and hardworking, and she was doing everything she could for her kids. She wasn't... And she always talked to me about how in Ireland she still felt this weird feeling of like being branded a certain way or taken a certain way, like perceived a certain way just by being a single mom. Like it's a weird thing. It's like she was like, yeah, no, there's a thing of like, oh, what did she do to get herself into that situation, rather than, oh, geez, I wonder what happened in her life, or maybe her partner died. Like you don't know, but people judge. Yes. So there's just a lot of judgment around her. Anyway, so I was really angry. But when I'm angry, sometimes I get a bit like, I just get a bit of a space cadet moment and imagine things. And I was just like fantasizing that she could build a house for herself because of who she is. She's so hardworking, right? And I was like, why is it all so wrapped up in mortgages and all this kind of thing? And I was quite naive because I wasn't looking at any of that stuff myself, because I'm in the acting industry thinking, Jesus, if I ever get a home, I'll be delighted. But I'd never really looked into it all. So I was naively searching how you build a house for cheap in Ireland. So it was like self-build Ireland cheap. That was my first Google on herself. And I found this guy, Dominic Stevens, who designed a house for himself for 25 grand at the time and built it in Leitrim, where the land is fairly cheap, obviously. And then it's about 10 grand for all your connections and stuff. But it was 25 grand, including your plumber putting in all the waterworks and the electricity. So it was a proper, complete build. And he built it with mates and the neighbours over 54 days across a year. And I was like, why is this not like headline news? You know? And it was real like my wake up moment to self-build movement or whatever. Anyway, that just meant I really didn't give a crap about my audition the next day. I remember trying to learn the lines and I was like getting distracted, going down Google rabbit holes. But just before my head hit the pillow, I just had this moment of seeing a story where a woman decides to build a house for herself, but a whole community and a new life forms around her. And it was kind of like a wishy-washy, just like, whoa, there's a story there. And in order for it to even be conceivable at this day and age in Dublin, I thought she must be trying to get out of a really bad situation, like in order to dare to dream of that. Mm-hmm. And at the time, because I was doing the Shakespeare stuff that you were mentioning, we were doing a lot of workshops in prisons and with like young people in Brooklyn, New York as well, actually. And we were doing all these workshops, but like we got lots of information given to us about prison systems and women in prison. And the percentage of women that end up serving a sentence that is somehow attached to the fact that they were in a relationship where their life was being threatened constantly, or they had to do something in order to survive because they tried to leave the person and then financially they couldn't get them. And so there was this weird treasure trail always leading back to domestic violence. So I kind of thought like, God, can I do this? Can I tackle all those issues in one movie? And I tried. And it was a massive journey for me because, see, I can say to you now in retrospect that that movie and that journey and writing that film and all that research ended up being a sort of journey for me as well, like personally, individually. Like I was saying to Conn on the phone the other day, I was like, I was invisible homeless. I was like an invisibly homeless person, and only that, like, my mum and dad had a spare room at one point when I literally had to leave a flat because the finance fell through on the movie, and I had to leave where I couldn't afford the next month's rent, and I could stay with my mum and dad for a few months. But like I was always constantly feeling very aware of what people must be going through on a much higher level because I was getting it on a much lower level, but still being an invisible homeless person. Do you know that kind of way?
But I think that's one of the reasons why the figures which we have at the moment of in excess of 10,000 people is actually very underestimated because like you, I would know many people of my son's generation, for example, who are either back at home with parents, long-suffering parents, or sofa surfing with friends or whatever, trying to wait for something to come up. And also that thread that you mentioned there about the violence, meaning that women are often pushed out into a situation where they have to try and find somewhere to live. But with that, you asked a really interesting question, which I think isn't asked often enough. The question is usually asked of the victim. We're back to judging again. Why did she stay? When the question should be, why does he do that? So there were lots of really interesting things that you brought up in the movie.
It's really, it's weird because when you're making movies, you're also you're telling a story and you're trying to entertain people, and there's got to be something that is going to bypass the brain and just get everyone here and make them feel and all this kind of thing. So I was kind of going at all this and doing all this research, but actually, I read a book on PTSD, read a book on this, that, and the other, homeless, self-building, blah, 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 blah. But really what I did was, considering what we're talking about here and oral histories and talking and listening, was I interviewed people. And I asked them, could I record? And then when I was putting things in the movie, the famous line in the court scene that everyone's always like, that's amazing, is I'm that's Sinead in Women's Aid. I rang her and said, come here, you said this in the interview, it's the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Can I put it in the court scene? She said, absolutely. And she was really, she wanted it to be in there and things like that. So there's lots of it that is from the people that tell their stories to me. But the biggest thing I learned about that was not just from the the family lawyers and the child psychologists and all those people that are the professionals that work with people going through something like this. It was women themselves. There was a woman who set up her own refuge in a small town that had been through so much stuff herself. And what I found refreshing about meeting her was not that she was sitting there going, this is my story and this is my tragedy and so proud. She was the happiest, bubbliest, amazing person. She was a single mom. She had a 9-year-old girl. She was literally organising a pregnancy for herself that she didn't even want to be with anyone to have. She was so happy. And then she was telling me, reflecting back on this story that had happened years ago to her, but she was an example of somebody who had healed and grown and chose to change, as you say. So when I listen to you tell your story there, I'm going, these are all the ingredients that were in my film. And so I realised it was not just about here's a gaff. It wasn't you know what I mean? Yeah. If that was the answer to everything, there wouldn't be a housing crisis. There's way more to it. So in the process of the journey, I realised that there's a thing about asking for help, as you were saying, asking for help and receiving help. And there's this strange thing of the person themselves has to be choosing it. Yes. And then also not just that, but they are listened to by the right kind of listener. And the person that helps as well, the weird thing is if you ask anyone that's involved in anything like that, or I remember even once just asking, ending up talking to somebody about something that was bothering me once years ago, and I still remember doing the typical Irish woman thing of geez, I'm sorry you never taken up your time there, and thanks for listening. I feel really bad for just taking an hour out of your day there, or whatever it was. And she went, excuse me, I was really honoured that you asked me for my help. And she was so please don't insult me then by saying, and belittling it. So there's a strange exchange that happens between people with help. Yeah. And I think we need to see it as more of a circular thing, a circular exchange, because not only do you get to go on this journey, I'm going to say your name wrong, Kandaliss, of forging your own future, all of these people that are around you get to be the agents that enable and help your change. And if you think they go home without a bit of job satisfaction or human satisfaction, go, Kandaliss, she got the thing,
happens, The change
so
both ways,
it's a win-win situation. Yeah. It's a really win-win situation. And so that's why I have that in the film herself, where she has to ask people for help. Yeah. And it's that she's gotten to the place in herself after a year of being in temporary accommodation of finally even being able to do that. That is a step.
And you were very clear about that too, Kandaliss, when you said you have to reach that moment yourself. And it was a great good fortune that you found the right people to listen to you at the right time.
100%, yeah.
So do you feel that now, at a later stage, that you would like to be able to give back some of that?
I've always, even before this, I've always had it in me to want to give back. I think that's what kind of you have with your nature, like when you are treated poorly or not listened to or respected or stigmatized, you just want to always give back then. And especially now where I've like the achievements that I've made, like I have the potential in me now to give back and keep just giving back. You can only keep what you have by giving it away.
You also said something very profound where you said something about needing to lose something important. Do you remember that?
Yeah, like I feel like I had to lose everything for me to gain finding my happiness and finding my way. I had to lose everything from friendships to becoming homeless to just even talking to my mother or family. You know, I had to, relationships, my mental health just decayed away. I lost absolutely everything, and that was my breaking point where I was like, I need to get help, and I actually do need to want this help. You can really only achieve all of these things when you have the want inside you. Yeah.
Okay. I can just, Claire, just something else which struck me as well when you were speaking. We're going to look at a clip in a moment. I think I have to say roll it there, Mike. I've always wanted to say that. You were saying that in your movie that you only used figures which were absolutely accurate from statistics. And I was watching the architect Roisin Murphy, her walk around Dublin the other night, and between herself and the representative from Peter McVerry, they'd calculated that there are between 180,000 and 200,000 empty dwellings in this country, that with a little bit of vision, or a lot of vision, people taking, you know, a 360-degree look at things could actually solve our homeless crisis. Yeah. But according to the experts, one of the problems is that we're doing things the wrong way around. We're looking after those who are investing, you know, Canadian funds that invest for teachers, firefighter funds from the US, pension funds, buying up all of the available units. So we're looking through the wrong end of the telescope. Yeah. Conn, you have prepared a 2-minute clip for us to take a look at.
Yeah, and I might just explain it quickly
Please
before
do.
you put it on. So the film obviously is 360, so you watch it in a headset. What we have here is basically I think it's called an overgrab, where you can basically kind of turn it into a 2D film. So when you're in it, the camera's kind of zooming around a bit, but which is kind of trying to replicate how your attention might move. But when you're actually watching it, you can look around the room. Also, this is essentially kind of like some raw footage from the project. The actual finished film. The great thing about 360 film is you've got 360 degrees, so you can play around. So for example, you might turn around, and what you expect to be behind you mightn't be behind you. So this is essentially just some raw footage from. But the opening scene of the film is set in Galway Simon, and it's the participants, including Kandaliss, sitting around having a cup of tea. And you might notice there's a cup of tea in front of you. So if you put on the headset when you go outside, you are literally sitting at the table with a cup of tea. So I don't want to say the words. You can say the words.
Roll it there, Mike.
I like my house, but like anyone will come in and sit down and have a cup of tea or things like that. Like walk on the mat if you want that. You know what I mean? But that's me.
Yeah.
And
it's yours. And
you know.
Yeah.
But the security that I got is priceless from Simon's, and I will never ever forget that. You know, I don't think any of us will. You know, but no, yeah, as I say, it's priceless. Just putting the key in the door and walk in, close the door. Don't lock it if you don't want to. No, that's the way I am. But when I'm down there first, I used to lock it. No, I don't.
And the thing I've always heard as well is like people being able to close the door behind you as well.
Oh yeah, it's just an amazing feeling. The first time you walk in, thank God I got an apartment at the same time, around the same time as Jeannie. It's just when you close the front door for the first time, it's like, wow, this is mine. Wow. How did I get this? It's like, what have I done to get this? It's like this feeling of pure contentment, and it's mine. This is actually mine. And you have that great feeling, and you can turn the clock Now the world can fuck off if it likes. This is not. That's what it is.
Martin, you're in your place now a while as well, like in the city there.
Yeah,
How's that been for you?
it's been great, like, but I just, one feeling I get to make when I'm out walking, and I just feel great that I can go home now, sit down and have a cup of tea. I don't have to worry about walking around town, wherever I kill time, all I do is I can just go home, sit down and have a cup of tea. Just that makes me feel really relieved.
Yeah, it's really
Just to
good.
be able to do that.
Yeah.
Just at the end of the day, just go home, sit down and have a cup of tea. It's bloody amazing.
You take that for granted an awful lot, wouldn't you?
Yeah, just.
It's the simple things. It's all the simple little things that really get. Oh, I can do that on my own. Okay, the world.
So instead of having to like say, walk around and kill time, like you were saying, you can go and let's go home and have a cup of tea.
It's a real good relief. It makes me feel, I don't know, just that little feeling, just being able to go home, sit down, have a cup of tea, whatever I want.
Yeah.
It's,
The feeling of joy that comes from that clip, if you could bottle it, it's absolutely fantastic. I have no idea what time it is, Katrina. Have we time for questions?
Loads of time for questions.
Okay, I wonder, is there anybody here from Galway Simon who might like to say a few words about the project? The fellow lurking in the doorway, is it?
You can use my mic.
What do you want me to say?
Just tell us a little bit about how the project came about. What was the inspiration behind it?
I suppose from like my point of view, I was
We'll get a mic to you.
interested in VR at the time, and I'd seen this new technology, and I was just sitting in Ayr Square in the car, and I'd seen one of our clients who was tapping or begging for money, and I just wanted to create, like, what can he see from his viewpoint, and what can people see from him? So that idea was stuck in my head, and I just couldn't let it go. And then I contacted Dave there, and then here we are now.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Well, okay.
And I suppose, as Conn was saying as well there, we don't know exactly what the end product will look like, but from like the 2-day workshop, from the oral history stuff, from the training and the crack we had, the amount of connectivity and fun within the group from all the participants in NUIG and the film crew and us, it was just an amazing experience so far, with no actual tangible results yet either.
Okay. Well, I think the results are seen here and here, so congratulations again to everybody involved.
Could I just get in on that? So, like, as Tommy says, when you do a project like this, there's a, this is apt considering what was happening over the river yesterday, there's an element of tightrope walking with no safety net. You got to just get into a room. Well, first of all, you got to get some money. And that's the, it costs money to produce empathy via virtual reality. So if anyone wants to invest, but we got funding from the Irish Research Council and from NUI Galway that allowed us to do this. But then you just have to have faith. You just got to accept that, like, well, what's the worst can happen is you make a film that no one wants to watch. It's not the end of the world. I don't think that's going to happen. But you have to just, if you're going to hand over control, you have to hand over control. Yeah. And you have to allow whatever happens, happens. As Tom said, we spent a lot of time, and I'd like to hear Kandaliss's perspective on this as well, but in a room, I think enjoying ourselves as well as, having some, some people sharing some difficult things as well. And altogether, we spent a lot of really great days. And going back to I can't speak for what Kandaliss or any of the other participants got out of it, but I can speak to what I got out of it.
Okay.
And it's like just a privilege. It was just a privilege to be there. And I think for me, what was incredible and, really, perspective giving was the determination of the people who were in the room to be happy. I spoke, again, I won't name names, but I spoke to one of the participants who got his home just as lockdown started. And I said, well, did you find lockdown lonely? And he said, well, I don't allow loneliness into this house. He said, I can be alone, but I'm not lonely. And also said that every night he thanks his house out loud. And I think we could all take a I never name names. So that's what I got, and my colleagues, David, who's here in the audience, and a number of other colleagues in the NUI. That's what we got from it. I'd love to hear, Kandaliss,
so
what
it's the
you got
process
from
of change again, as Claire was saying. You know, being shared among everybody. You change the people who are involved in the same way as it, in some way, in that you change the participants. What was the experience like for you? Was it fun?
As Conn said, I felt very privileged to be able to work on such a project that, you know, is so open-minded about homelessness and, you know, trying to end the stigma that, you know, it could be anyone in this crowd tomorrow. It doesn't have to be someone sleeping in a sleeping bag. It doesn't have to be someone that is going through drug addiction or anything like that. You know, we worked along with people from Simon who had amazing stories, and people whose stories would melt your heart about how they became homeless and how homelessness can really happen to anyone in an hour, in a day, in a week, in a year. It could really happen to absolutely anyone. And working around that is such an amazing experience to be able to get out there, and especially the whole project itself, you know, it was really, you know, thought about, and like everything, the whole team, you know, it wasn't just some people with a camera, it was people who really wanted to capture moments and really wanted to, you know, leave people empathetic and, you know, with a change of heart when they leave the room, you know. To like,
so did it change your attitude then towards people and towards life in general?
Yeah, and definitely towards homelessness and the stigma around homelessness, that, you know, it's always about, you know, victim blaming, you know, it's you must have done something wrong for you to be in this position, but, you know, everybody's story is different, and I think that really is, the project is really about that as well, that, you know, not everyone comes from that kind of stigmatization where it's like, you know, everyone is a bad person or a bad egg, you know. Some of these people came from having great lives to, you know, something just happening in the click of a finger. And some people grew up in that kind of, you know, lifestyle, and, you know, it's you shouldn't blame others for, you know, how they became homeless, but more so listen down and hear their story, and, you know, you'd be really amazed with what you'd, you know, leave with the change of heart.
So it's about suspending judgment again, isn't it, what Claire was saying earlier? Yeah. So this has been such a fantastic project. Where is it going to go next? I mean, we're not stopping here, surely. What's next?
No. That is literally the $1 million question. So we're finishing the film at the moment. So we've got hopefully the final edit next Friday in Athlone, and so the project. So we started off talking about empathy. So there, as I mentioned, there has been some research done around the power of VR to produce empathy. So this is also a project that will have a testing element to it. So once the film is finished, we're going to test it essentially, and you know, you show it to 100 people and see, does it change their impact on attitudes. The difference between this and what's been done elsewhere is that this is the first project, at least that I'm aware of, that has been co-created in the way that this is. Okay. So whilst other people have made films about homelessness, this is the first VR film that is made by people who've experienced homelessness, and so we're going to test it. Then we're going to launch it. We're going to hopefully have an exhibition in Galway, and sometime in September we'll launch it. And then the plan is to have a bigger exhibition here on campus at some time, hopefully December, where about Galway Simon. And so that's going to also include, you come in, you can watch the film, you can listen to the oral histories, and with some information around Galway Simon, the history of Galway Simon, and about the wider homeless crisis. Because one of the questions around VR is okay, it's great. One of the potential criticisms is that empathy is important, but is it enough? You know, so you put on the headset. you know, that you've this idea that you can feel good about feeling bad. You put on, you go, oh God, that's awful. Oh, geez, I'm such a good person. I really felt bad for that person there. But the question is, does that translate into understanding? Does it translate into action? And so we're trying to build a structure around that. And then ultimately, we want to keep doing this. We want to keep exploring the power of VR, but also this methodology of involving people, co-creation, to change attitudes, potentially about other social issues, potentially about homelessness on a wider scale. So it really depends also on money. So we have to. So, you know, I spend my time writing funding applications to try and get more money in. You know, I'm sure you know all about that. You know, trying to get films off the ground. So,
And in a similar way, Claire, isn't a film an act of co-creation?
Completely. Like Claire built a film, Sandra built a house. That's what happened with herself. That's everyone kept laughing at the meta world of it, like, you know. But I learned so much by that process. And also I did a self-building course in Wales, and it was really amazing just listening to you all talk about the co-creative process of making the film itself and everything. When I was just doing the self-building course, like, I learned so much about the value of that journey. So, like, as much as we're all, it's like, I feel like sometimes if an alien came to the planet and asked us some questions, we'd all be like, well, we really want to fix this thing. All it is shelter for all of us. We still haven't got that. Like, you know, you think about it and you go, it is mental. Like, it's just such a simple, I nearly cursed there, and a simple need on the planet for everybody. And you just go, oh, you know. So therefore, like, I was kind of thinking about it, pontificating this morning, thinking about it coming in. And I was like, I think there's a weird thing where deep down, maybe we all do want the same thing. Like, even the Vulture Fund people. Like, if you think about it, because I wrote about it a few years ago, and I found this piece of writing this morning where I was like, oh my God, yeah. It's this weird thing where you think a home itself, like, think about what's behind a home. Like, what do you want? You want a feeling of security, and you want a feeling of rootedness and safety and just a place to dwell. Like, it's really, like, if you think about what a home is and what it's given you, and then realise that, like, all of these madsers wanting loads of money from empty houses and vulture funds, like, if you look at that deep down, they want a sense of security. It's just in money. It's really weird, like, when you start to look at it in terms of just sensations and feelings and what you actually want as a result. So I was literally this morning going, right, well, empathise with the Vulture Funder people. What do they want? Because seriously, because we're going to have to, if we all want this whole thing to shift to a new level, it's everybody's on the boat. Like, it's Noah's Ark. Like, it's not just the homeless people, and it's not just the people with houses and that are trying to get a mortgage application through. It's also the government people and the rich people, the people that have their, like, walking around and looking at the empty houses that day. When I walked around with Peter McVerry a few years ago, because I worked with them loads in the process of this, I couldn't believe that there was, like, this GDPR rule where you couldn't even gain access to finding out who owns these houses.
Yeah.
Like, so you can't even write to them and say, hey, mate, would you consider? Or, you know what I mean? It's all just this, like, crap. Like, it's total bullshit. Sorry. But I just kind of, the whole thing makes me aim completely at the co-creation verb. You're dead right. Like, that's what it is. It's like, how can we all together understand each other and keep moving forward with it? Because when I did that self-building course, I felt such satisfaction by not knowing something at the start of the day and knowing it at the end of the day, like a simple thing like learning how to mark up wood and use a drill, say, or whatever. But in the exchange of learning that, somebody else who's down there who does know how to use a drill tells me how to, there's an exchange that happens. And there's this, it's not just about the end result that we're all aiming at, it's about the journey. Like, we can actually make the journey enjoyable. Like, and I love what you said in the video there, like, just saying, like, just, yeah, he's like so grateful for coming to this home that he has, but, like, look at the journey that you have had. I would not say that you would want to be robbed of that journey.
Absolutely not.
Exactly.
My life it happened, it's done. I'm now gracious to where I'm at. It was a struggle, but I did it, and I did it with the Simon. And this this project is just, oh shit, this project is just amazing. I had the pleasure of interviewing Kandaliss, and it was the most astonishing day I think I've ever spent in my life. We shared our stories, and it was astonishing. And we have built this trust. I wrote a little piece about it. It's just how we connected complete strangers inside in that room, from people from Dublin, from the production team, to university, to Simon. Complete trust. Even the president of the university, complete trust inside in a room was just fucking, unbelievable.
Like
That's
me.
your fault, Claire. Blame the actress. But I was wondering, how do we get society to stop the stigma they have of people who ask for help? What is wrong with asking for help? Why is there a stigma for asking for help? There is a stigma.
Yeah.
I felt a stigma.
I
in
really
society.
don't know. I don't know. It's so weird, because if you didn't ask for help, you wouldn't get half the things you
Exactly.
need done.
It just doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Why people are stigmatized for asking for help.
Well, I mean, maybe one of the answers to that is what you and all of the people who were working with you on this project have done. You got together yourselves and you overcame that stigma, and you came out the other side of it. And your journeys, your homes, your gratitude, all of the things that you have as a result of that, you actually had the courage just to say, I'm not actually allowing myself to be stigmatized by that. I'm different. I'm not going to let that happen. And I think it's wonderful to see that kind of energy coming from the ground up.
Yeah.
And thank you very much both for your contribution here and here. Thank you.
We're at 2 o'clock, Catherine, but if you want to take a couple of questions, we can do another 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I'd be very happy to if there's anybody in the audience who would like to, not even necessarily a question, but make a comment, or yes, lady back up there in the third last row.
Thanks very much. I have to say, Kandaliss, your story is amazing. And the word, for me, it's the word empathy. And this project is very important because this should be brought out to the service providers who have no empathy for the homeless. And I'm a community development worker with the Galway Traveller Movement, so as a traveller myself, I know the lived experience. My community was over 1,000 members homeless in Galway City, and the stigma and discrimination on the community because of their situation, and it's just terrible. So along with a public sector duty training, I think empathy training is something that you should do, and I have to give credit to Simon, because I would have referred a lot of people, and having children homeless in this day and age is absolutely crazy, because I think what happens is, if there's an issue with a person, might be anti-social behaviour, well, the children aren't taken into account. So where's the rights of the child, And there's, yes, within the traffic community, we have a lot of hidden homeless as well. But I have to say, it's a brilliant project. And don't forget the Galway Traveller Movement. We'd love to collaborate with you on that. Anyway, thanks very much.
There you go. Something else beginning from the ground up. Yes?
Hi, thanks very much for everything, and especially Kandaliss as well. Thank you for your bravery and your courage, because it's not easy to sit up there. So thank you for sharing all that with us. I don't really know how to ask this, because I'm really reeling with all the information, but just in terms of, I suppose it's a bit technical, but for the VR and empathy, and I spent my whole life wondering, how the hell do you get people to care? How do you get people to care about anything? Do you know, I feel like it's really difficult. And it's back to what you said, Tommy, about that. I wonder about the person looking for money, and how would we try and imagine that, or like feel it in some way. Is there something with the displacement of it? So if I'm in that surround and I feel like I could grab that cup of tea, but I actually can't, is that where that gap, is it in that I might just actually feel and bring the feeling to action? Because I think sometimes the word homeless, I don't know what to do with it, because I think everybody carries some kind of a home with them. Do you know, it's just, and your history and your story and all of that. So I'm just wondering, is it, sorry, I'm kind of getting lost in that idea, but just, is it that gap? Because I think when you feel without, or just like you can't ask for help, you're displaced. You don't feel like, well, I'm not like these people, or I can't talk like these people, or I can't ask for that, or maybe I'm not as bad as this person. You know, so it's that, I'm just wondering about displacement and then using that as a method to create empathy, I suppose. If that makes any
If
sense.
I could say just maybe a word or two just about that, I think that one of the difficulties for us, people who have homes, perhaps that the homeless situation or the homeless predicament of those 10,000 plus people and more, it's almost like a parallel universe. We don't see it. We don't walk in those shoes because that is not our experience. But it's stories, it's oral histories like what are being explored here. To me, they are the things that close the gap. When those stories become accessed and it becomes something which becomes out there and people hear more about it and it becomes more familiar, because some of the impact of the really powerful films such as Herself and also Rosie, the film about the homeless family a couple of years ago, those created a movement immediately around empathy for homeless people. The problem was we come up against a wall of no social policy or no political policy or no political will to deal with it. Yeah. So I honestly strongly believe that movements such as this from the ground up that keep putting those stories out there, let us keep hearing them, let us keep seeing them, let's keep experiencing them. That's the only way that I can see where that gap, as you call it, is going to be bridged. If anybody else wants to contribute to that, please.
Just a quick thing, just going back to when we had a 2-day workshop, as I said, next door, and we did a whole load of exercise, we did a whole lot of sharing, and then as we moved towards the end of it, we started to think, okay, well, what's this film going to be? What's it going to be about? And so the question was to the participants, well, there was 2 questions really. It was the main question was, what do you want people to feel when they take off the headset? And there was a lot of debate about it, but at the end, I think the thing, what they want people to feel was anger. But also there was, and I know this is something that everybody feels strongly about, is that this isn't 10 minutes or 15 minutes of doom and gloom of misery, because there's a lot of joy, and like we shared in that joy. So what you're trying to do, and the other thing that came to it was what they wanted people to feel was this can happen to anyone. This can, as Kandaliss already said. So you're trying to, I guess, create something, and Claire, you can speak to this more than I can, artistically, that enables people to recognize themselves and their own situation and understand how fragile what we think as not fragile things are. Do you know? And I think that's because it comes down, like that's why I'm fascinated with home, because home was bound up these ideas about security. But it takes so little.
Yeah,
it takes so little.
I have this vivid memory, for example, of when my first child was born, and you're so protective. And we were lying there, and we were in a kind of a terraced house, and she couldn't sleep. And then the neighbours were having a party. The sort of thing I'd have been doing 6 months earlier. But I felt really traumatized, because I felt, this little precious thing, and this outside world, you realize how easy the outside world can come in, and how fragile all the things that you think is secure are. And so I think that's what ideally art can do and should do, is help us to understand the things that we take for granted, how fragile they are.
Yeah, there's actually a great book called Creating Freedom that's by an artist, and it's literally him. He just went at it. He went, right, how are we going to create the new world? And he just literally was like, this is what's going on. And he did a big, huge... what's his name? Raul Martinez, I think it is. He did a talk a couple of years ago, actually, in an Irish book festival. And it's just so, like, I understand what you're saying. Like, on some level, you're going, like, what do you actually do after watching something like this, you know? And I was the same. Sure, I was making herself and literally putting information in it for how to build a gaff, what the numbers were, what the money was, all this kind of thing, as if it was like a blueprint on some level for the future. But I don't know how it has any practical implications, you see. Now, the only thing that did come out of it was Amazon created a whole package, because we sold the film to Amazon. So in America, there's a whole self-building package that you download from their website when you watch my movie, and it's about self-building in people's back gardens and all the forms you have to fill out in America to kind of just get permissions and all this kind of thing. So they did do that, which I thought was kind of cool. But in Ireland, I don't know what I can do with it, because I think you see, what's even happening in this room is amazing, because there's talking and listening, right? And we're all empathetically listening and talking to each other and listening to your amazing story. And in that process, something happens anyway. And there is a shift of perspective and energy and emotion. And I think actually just something to do, there is something that comes out of that. I just don't know what it is practically. And sometimes when I was doing all the research for this film, I would write things like, I'd be like, if we just stopped focusing as a mass people on the government need to do this, or they all have the money, they all have if we just stopped doing that for a minute and went, okay, actually houses are bricks, connection to the water, and went, because this is what I learned from doing it herself, is that when you actually just focus it all in a different direction, you go, actually, yeah, let's just try and find a different way. And I know that you have to get money in order to do that, but it's not as much money as they have. And it's not as much power as you think. It's actually quite practical.
Yeah, I
just don't know how you join the dots. I'm the same as yourself. I don't know.
Well, maybe we could all start by hounding whoever our local TD is on a regular basis, because certainly when around the mother and baby homes issue, when the report came out, for example, and a campaign was begun to send thousands of emails to TDs about how dissatisfied people were. And it did generate a public response which showed people's unhappiness and dissatisfaction with that report. And there are now academics working on trying to shift the perspective that was given in that report. So that's the only thing maybe I could suggest that we could all do tomorrow morning, is hound whoever our local councillors are. Do we have a final word very quickly from anybody else in the audience? Yes.
Sorry, this came up yesterday as well. The idea of people having maybe more than one home, and a lot of the walkabouts where people are counting vacant properties. A lot of those properties are vacant because if we rent them, the law sides with the tenant as opposed to with the landlord. Now, and I suppose I'm using the word "we" just because it's convenient, but we are now being bullied, or we're going to be bullied into selling our home, or second or third homes, or whatever it is, by being penalised, as opposed to being incentivised by reducing the capital gains tax, because that is a lot of what is preventing people from selling these properties that are in every town and village. And it would make an awful difference to a lot of the villages as well. And I've no doubt a lot of us here came from villages that are now desolate.
Nobody living in the centre of them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk about living over shops and what have you. And our family home, all our rooms are over the shops. And they're great. They're great properties, and they're lovely homes.
I think the bottom line is actually no joined up thinking on any aspect of our homeless situation, unfortunately. And I think we're going
Catherine,
to have to...
there was just one gentleman here who was looking to get in. Maybe if you could just pass back down there.
I was 16 years old at Clare Palace. I got no social welfare. I got no medical card. And I had 16 operations on both legs. Now, reach out for help. The government doesn't want to help this country at all for homeless. Look at all the children. And I feel to myself sad for those women with the children. And all the empty houses is disgraceful, you know. And you get help of a TD. You know what a TD? He give you the door, because I went to them. Okay. And it took me, the Simon community gave me social welfare. I'm with them over 44 years. I've been in Dublin Simon in 69. I've seen people in Dublin. I've seen them in Galway. And I could say this, there's about 180 homeless people out there today. And they got tragic accidents. One was in a shed for 3 weeks up in Terrace Hill Common. When they found him, the girls, his face was hit by the rats, Tom Fitzpatrick. Another man buried in a car, burned in a car here in the Spanish Army. That was never highlighted. It was never put on the paper. It's all covered up about homeless. They don't want to do anything about homeless. And fair play to Simon. They went out and walked. And the students, and I had great time for the students at this college. They helped out a lot for homeless. So that's all I had to say.
Thank you very much. I think that's the appropriately positive note to end on, with another round of applause for the Simon community. Thank you all very much for being here. You've been a terrific audience. My huge thanks to Kandaliss. The mega star of our show, and to Clare, who actually forgot to tell you that during her self-build course, she learned to use 17 power tools. And to Conn and all of the team for the wonderful work they're doing on gathering together oral histories and virtual reality to create empathy among the population for the homeless. Thank you.
If I can thank Catherine Byrne for being a fantastic moderator. She demonstrates in herself all the virtues of empathy. She's a highly empathetic person. What a wonderful event. Probably one of the highlights of our First Thought programme this year. And thanks again to all our wonderful participants.